You're listening to Contesting Wrestling, the podcast where we discuss the things that fans love and normal people who like things that don't suck don't understand about the world's most popular form of simulated combat. My name is Evan Burke. I, of course, am being flippant in that little intro bit there. I'm here.
I am flippanting you off.
Oh, snap. We're here because I am somebody who, historically, I really don't care for wrestling, but three of my oldest and closest friends love wrestling and are involved in the wrestling business to some degree or another and spend a lot of time thinking about it and are basically walking encyclopedias of the history of wrestling. And so this podcast is them trying to get me to understand what is great about it, why I should like it, what's going on. This is a podcast for people who either are longtime wrestling fans who want a new perspective on it, or people like me who are like, what the fuck is this? Why do this with your time and not something else? I'm a writer. You can follow me on Twitter at Evan Burke, etc.
Thank you, Evan, and my name is Doc Diamondfire. I've been involved in the wrestling business myself for about 11 years. You can follow me on Twitter at Dr. Diamondfire. That's at Dr. Diamondfire. I'm very happy to be here, as I always am. I love talking wrestling with everybody, and let's continue going around.
And it's me, Katie Vella, a.k.a. at Ref Katie on Twitter. I have been a fan of wrestling since 2003. I've been in the wrestling business since 2014. I am both a walking encyclopedia of wrestling and a connoisseur of butts.
Which those two things I feel often go hand in hand.
They do, yes.
Butt in butt.
I am Dr. Ben Abelson. I am a professor of philosophy at Mercy College and a person who thoroughly enjoys wrestling, butts and all.
Butts and all.
Today we are, so the way that we pick topics for this, we kind of go
scientific.
It is, yes. Yeah, we have a whole team of researchers that exist only in our minds.
And by that, I mean we hit Evan in the kneecaps with sticks until he chooses something.
Basically. Well, we alternate between two things. We either kind of follow my interest, and I'm like, what's the deal with this person? What's going on there? Please don't assault me while we're recording. It's very unprofessional.
Yeah.
Or you guys, will think of a topic like, you know what, this is a thing you should know about. This is something you should learn. This is an important part of your education before we're going to move forward.
If you assault Evan during recording, you have to clean the poop bucket.
That's because I have a very sensitive stomach, and I don't care for being attacked. Not a lot of people do. I guess if you do care for being attacked, you should become a wrestler.
That's on you.
So today's more in the first category. Today we are following my muse, stuff that I was interested in. We have so far encountered the Cersei Lannister of wrestling, Charlotte Flair, several times, and I was like, you know what? I would like to, do a bit of a deep dive into her career thus far, because I find her character really interesting. I find her wrestling style interesting. We have yet to do a Ric Flair episode. We are inevitably going to do one. But I
think it's kind of cool that we're doing Charlotte first.
Well, Charlotte's more contemporary.
Yeah, she's more currently relevant.
And I think will eventually. This is a bold claim, but I think she will eventually eclipse her father in terms of importance to wrestling as a whole.
Well, Ric Flair has said, one of the proudest things he can say these days is that there are a lot of people, especially younger fans, who don't see Charlotte as Ric Flair's daughter. They see Ric Flair as Charlotte's father.
And
hold on, I think I said that wrong. Let me start
that
over.
No, you said it right. Yeah.
I didn't say that Charlotte was Ric Flair's father.
I don't think you did.
No? Okay.
And I think that you
leave all that in.
100%. And I think that we see that, especially with how the commentators talk about her, we really see that evolution over the course of these matches.
Yes.
Because one of these matches is from 2014, and then one, I believe, is from last year, 2019, right?
2015 to 2018.
Okay, so
the range.
So even just in that short period of time, we go from the commentators constantly talking about how she's Ric Flair's daughter to like a passing mention.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think, man, she's fucking awesome. Like, the Flairs are clearly genetic super beings.
So she does make sure to call herself genetically superior.
Which skews very close to being like I'm a Nazi Uberman.
If we
but-
didn't all know she was talking about being a flare.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Rick himself is basically unkillable.
And they are. I mean, like it. I make the Cersei Lannister reference, which actually was a thing that Ben was how Ben first described her to me. But it's true. They really are kind of the Lannisters of wrestling, where they're like these, like, they're like blonde super people with all of the power and all of the prestige, and goddamn. So yeah. So we watched 3 matches today.
Yeah, so we started off with Charlotte versus Sasha Banks, who is perhaps her greatest rival, so one of her greatest rivals in her career so far, at least, especially her biggest early rival. And this is a match from when the two of them were in NXT for the NXT women's title at the strangely named NXT TakeOver R Evolution in 2015.
What is that supposed to represent?
It's like evolution and revolution, but it's our evolution, I guess. And if you're an idiot and you say R and you don't know how to pronounce our,
They didn't use the
Okay.
name again.
Then the name was picked out by coked up tripping sharks.
That's
Yes.
they have too much power in our society.
so this
I
was
wish that wasn't such a controversial statement.
this was a culmination of the feud between Charlotte and Sasha Banks within NXT, which was cool. It saw the rise of both of them to prominence. They were originally like the flunkies of Summer Rae,
Right.
who was a much less good wrestler and important character, but they were brought in, they were trainees at the time, starting in FCW and then in NXT. Summer Rae, I think, was sent down to NXT to work to get better.
Yeah, I guess.
So yeah, the team was called the BFFs. You remember what it stood for?
It wasn't what it usually stands for.
Yeah,
something
it's
else,
like
but I can't
bold,
remember
ferocious females or something like
now.
that.
Something like that. I'm really not sure. I don't even want to look it up.
Yeah, it's
because
not
they broke out so hard from it.
right. So originally Charlotte was teaming with Bayley, and who was Bayley, Charlotte, Becky, and Becky Lynch and Sasha Banks would end up becoming the 4 horsewomen of WWE. But it started with Charlotte teaming with Bayley and then betraying Bayley to join the BFFs. And Charlotte and Sasha as a team feuded with Becky Lynch and Bayley for a while, until Charlotte abandoned Sasha in a match because Sasha is being a pain in the ass to her. So Charlotte ended up being the babyface in this feud. So she abandoned Sasha Banks, which is usually something that a heel does.
Yeah.
But in this case, people disliked Sasha, or in the storyline, Sasha was already sort of a villain, so it kind of made sense. So Becky ends up teaming with Sasha, and Charlotte befriends Bayley. So they switch partners in that way. Charlotte saves Bayley, which is what cements her as the babyface. And then it leads to this match with Sasha Banks, who is not Ratchet, as the crowd would chant at her. They would chant Sasha's Ratchet. That was the first that I ever heard the phrase Ratchet being, not 15.
It was around the culture, I believe.
It turned into a dueling chant of Sasha's Ratchet. No, she's not.
The hairstyle that she's sporting in this match, I think, was to make herself look more Ratchet,
Yeah, something like that.
with the weird braids in the front.
Well,
and
Sasha Banks eventually developed a very cool and unique look for herself, but when she first started developing it, she looked like a little girl that got into her grandma's jewelry closet.
yeah, I think
and then eventually she found out, like, okay, do this and this and this, and she became the boss.
Get some cool
Get
sunglasses.
some cool sunglasses, yeah.
I think also the hairstylist team in
Yeah.
NXT is not quite as professional or not quite as good as the one in WWE. So you see a very, her look definitely took a step up when she got to the
I
main
mean,
roster.
they're as professional now, but at the time, not.
Yeah, NXT was still much more developmental than it is now.
I like how in wrestling, even if you come from royalty, you still have to, you really do have to earn your place. Like,
yeah.
sure, like you've got connections and whatever and introduced to the right people, but like nobody's going to respect you if you don't pay your dues.
Yeah.
And you really have to come up from, I mean, I'm sure she didn't necessarily start at the bottom.
She was trained by Lodi.
Really?
Yeah.
Initially, yeah?
Yeah, Lodi from WCW.
Well, Charlotte was initially a volleyball player when she was, like, younger. She's very tall, and volleyball is very difficult.
There's a segment in WCW that's supposed to mostly revolve around Rick and his son David, who was awful at wrestling, and they have all the flares in the ring, and they clearly put Charlotte, who's like 12, at the back trying to hide the fact that she's already taller than all of them.
Yeah.
Do you remember that, Ben?
I haven't seen
I
that.
was
no.
Yeah.
I had to look up. I looked up her height and was shocked that she is 5'10", because she looks like she is 6'3". Like,
I mean, compared to most of the other women who
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
A lot
shorter
of
than
a lot of the women's roster is a lot shorter than you'd think. Is
Yeah.
the thing. Like,
She
a lot of them
towers
are
over
around
them.
my height. I'm 5'3".
the ones who look short in the ring, if you ever meet them in person, they're tiny.
Oh,
Now-
so Zelina Vega is the teeniest human I've ever seen.
now there's like a tragic story behind her getting into wrestling,
Yeah.
right?
Her brother Reed, her little brother Reed, was gonna be the wrestler of the bunch. Like, David tried and kind of failed, and then got out instead of like grinding away at it. Reed was an absolute superstar amateur wrestler from the time he was like 8 years old. And Rick.
It is worth noting, not to cut you off, Reed was Charlotte's full brother. David is her much older half brother, correct?
Yes, that's true.
I would imagine that Ric Flair has a lot of children with a wide variety.
Oh,
He's had
boy.
3 wives, right?
4 at this point. I
4
think.
wives.
I don't
Oh,
think-
right, he has a new wife.
I don't think they ever got legally married. They had like a commitment ceremony, but I think Flair is done putting down all of his money on paper after what happened with his third wife.
Anyway, to continue on Doc's story.
Yeah. So Reed was a very promising pro wrestler. He started going back and forth from Japan and America to like start getting experience before anything good can happen to him. And when he was very young, he died of a heroin overdose. It was very sudden, and it was just awful.
And Rick found him, right?
Yeah, Rick found him, and Rick was devastated. And Charlotte, her real name Ashley Flair, she was never she always liked wrestling, but she never thought she was going to get into wrestling. And she thought at that point, because volleyball, you don't go pro in volleyball.
Sure.
She was a very good collegiate, volleyball player. The opportunity was there, and she was like, well, if he can't live his dreams, I can live his dreams. And you'll see her like do the point at the sky referencing thing. That's to her brother.
Yeah,
know?
and, and they also have, worth noting, they also have another much older sister, Megan, who is David's full sister, I believe.
I'm not sure of the motherage of
and
Megan.
And Megan is married to Conrad Thompson.
Yes, he's...
Oh, I didn't know that. Wow.
They just got married like a year ago. Conrad, as he puts it, he is a very good salesman. His
All
day.
right.
Well, I don't want to talk too much about Conrad Thompson because we're a small podcast, and
He
he's
is the king of
He's the king of
podcasts.
No,
wrestling
talk
podcasts.
shit about him. Come
No,
on,
I'm not
let's
talking
get him
shit.
some
I like
fight.
Conrad Thompson.
Fight us,
Yeah.
Conrad. Fight us.
Well, the main thing
Get
I want
Please
Bruce
don't actually
Pritchard
fight us.
and Conrad Thompson versus.
The main thing I want to say about Conrad Thompson is that his day job is still that he sells mortgages. He is a very good salesman.
So he's responsible for the financial crisis in
I
2007.
don't think he was selling mortgages in 2007. He's like my age.
Man, if the most popular wrestling podcaster still has a day job, we're pretty fucked.
Well, he doesn't
Yep.
want to. He doesn't want to get out of it because he, as he puts it, also the average age of his co-host is over 60, and he knows it's not going to
Yeah.
last.
Yeah.
He's a smart guy. But yeah, so the Megan Flair never got into the business. Their real name is Flair, it's just spelled differently.
FLEIHR.
Yeah,
Yes.
like Fleer.
Oh, where is Queen City a place?
Yeah,
That's Charlotte, North Carolina. She didn't want to call herself Charlotte from Charlotte, North Carolina.
That makes-
so they announced her from the Queen City.
Because I was trying to figure out if if Queen City was like just the
Yeah,
name
it
of
is
a
a
city
place.
I didn't know, or if she's just from some sort of mythical land filled only with queens.
I mean, that
Charlotte
is Charlotte, North Carolina, right?
I guess.
Charlotte is Ric Flair's adopted hometown. He was born. He was raised anyway in Minnesota. He was born. We don't know because he was stolen as a baby and sold as an adopted baby. And
Yeah,
that's true.
he was a black market baby.
Yeah.
All right, let's put a pin in that for the Ric Flair episode. 'cause
Okay,
that's
so Charlotte got in. Yeah, and you're right. You get your foot in the door if you have, if you're wrestling royalty and all that. But yeah, you got to go through the system. She went through FCW. Wrestling schools are littered with the quit psyches of sons and daughters of wrestlers that didn't really have a passion for it or couldn't do it.
Yeah, we'll probably mention this several times in this episode. There was recently a documentary about FCW, Florida Championship Wrestling, which was the predecessor to NXT in WWE Developmental on the network. And they talk about, for instance, Richie Steamboat. Ricky Steamboat's son, who showed a lot of promise, and he got injured once and just never really made it back.
Yeah.
Yeah, it happens. But she went through the system, and here she is. At the top of NXT, which was not nearly as big of a deal then as it was now, as evidenced by the fact that they were doing their big show at the NXT arena. But she was one of the things that that really built NXT, that brought it forward to what it is now.
And it's really, even if this is relatively early in her career, I mean, it's so fucking impressive. One thing I like generally about women's wrestling stylistically is that this is true for men's wrestling too, but it's a lot more apparent in women's wrestling, is that it really is weaponized gymnastics.
Yes.
And especially the way that she does the cartwheels in or the flips in. There was one specific moment in this match that I was really blown away by the athleticism of, where she does a moonsault onto. I'm learning the fucking moves now, everybody. I can. She does this an attempted moonsault onto Sasha Banks. Sasha Banks rolls out of the way. Charlotte lands on her feet and then just flips forward onto her, does a standing front flip onto Sasha Banks.
Yeah, that was sort of a riff off of a Kota Ibushi thing, where he used to do a moonsault. The person would roll into the ring, and then he'd land on his feet, and then he'd moonsault again right from there. And Charlotte developed on that and instead does a front flip senton splash onto Sasha. It's really cool.
The body control that she has is absolutely phenomenal. It looks like her center of gravity is always exactly where she wants it to be.
And, Charlotte and Sasha, in an earlier episode, Evan, you asked us about, who are the real innovators of moves. And the two of them are two people in the current crop of wrestlers who, create new moves all the time, especially Sasha, I think. But Charlotte has a couple of cool ones as well. Her natural selection finisher, which nowadays it doesn't look as good as it used to.
Yeah.
The women on NXT really knew how to sell it right, I think.
Yeah.
And there's something has been off about
she
it
trained
recently.
with all of them. They probably took it hundreds of times in training.
The finish of this match is it off of the top rope, which is
Yeah,
awesome.
I also just really appreciate, I always like seeing wrestlers do, each other's signature moves on them. There's a real power in that. And there's a point where Sasha Banks gets her in a hold and then starts going, woo, woo. That was very, very powerful.
And I think it says something about Charlotte, being that she's this legacy wrestler, that her innovative moves are often riffs on previous moves. She takes the figure 4 and turns it into the figure 8 by bridging out of it. The natural
It's an incredible bridge too. She bridges back
totally.
so far.
Yo, man, yeah.
The natural selection is a riff off of Mr. Perfect's head snap,
Yep.
which was a move that I always really liked as a kid. And yeah, so I think she's thinking about that. I think that's all very intentional. I like how, though she calls herself genetically superior, Sasha calls her generically basic.
Yes. Yeah, man. Yeah, Sasha gets in some great. Cause something I've noticed with all of Charlotte's matches, there's always a really interesting series of setups and reversals. And in this especially, she has a few sequences with Sasha, and there's including one where she winds up reversing something, and then Sasha is on her shoulders for what they call the electric chair.
Yeah, electric chair drop.
And just the look on Sasha Banks' face when that is about to when she realizes that's about to happen, and it's oh my god. Yeah, something that I noticed with Charlotte that seemed to evolve over time is that while she's not necessarily doesn't necessarily have like acting skill or something like that.
Yeah.
Her facial expressions and the way that she physically communicates where she is in the match emotionally really evolves over time.
Yeah, we'll see that especially in the Asuka match, I think. But on your point about them doing each other's moves, at one point, Sasha does a move to Charlotte that Charlotte had been doing. It's where you put the person in a head scissors. When you're sitting down and they're on their back, and you wrap your legs around the back of their neck, and then you spin over so that they're on their belly, and drive your hips up and down, smashing their head into the mat over and over again. The wrestler Alex Shelley innovated that, and he called it the skull fucker. And Sasha Banks totally skull fucks Charlotte in this match.
Yeah, they don't call it that on NXT television.
No, they do not.
But yeah, it's a really cool match. I think the dynamic between Sasha and Charlotte is really interesting. You know, Charlotte as kind of the chosen one, and Sasha as this upstart who no one really expected anything out of, but, you know, rose to become as good or even better than Charlotte herself. And I think they're going to play off of that dynamic for the entirety of their careers.
I mean, to be fair, Sasha does also have famous relatives.
Yes, she is the cousin of Snoop Dogg.
Yes.
And I feel like there's like I guess there's a nose that runs in that family, because she doesn't really look like Snoop Dogg, except they have very similar noses.
They have
They do.
some familial,
Yes.
Yeah.
similarities. You're right. She doesn't really look like Snoop Dogg, but like you hear that and you're not surprised.
They're
Yeah.
like close cousins, though. They're like first cousins.
Yeah, they're
right?
first cousins. She said he used to, because he would get invited to all the wrestling shows, and she would always bother him to like, because if you have a famous a relative, that's what you bother them. Take me to the WWE shows, get me backstage,
Hell
let me
yeah.
meet the guys. You know.
Now, if there's maybe one small criticism I have about the match, it's that Charlotte doesn't really come off as the babyface that well.
Yeah.
I think the crowd gets even more behind Sasha because she's so impressive.
I
in
think
it.
you're right.
Charlotte's always been more of a natural heel.
It's hard for her to be a face. I think it's hard. I mean,
Yeah.
because she's so magnificent and impressive in that way, and has that pedigree behind her. I think it's hard for her to be a face. But in the second match, which I think just relatively compared to the other three, I think of as the bad match for this episode, just because it's not quite the banger that the other two are. But in her match with Nikki Bella for the Divas title, the one where she captured the WWE Divas title for the first time and the last time, because it would then be rechristened the women's title.
Thanks, Stephanie McMahon, for that.
Well, we'll get into that.
Stephanie McMahon, the hero of women's wrestling.
But I think in this match, Charlotte actually does come off much more sympathetic. And that part of that is because of Nikki Bella's effective heel work.
Oh yeah, and I also it was really nice to see. So I watched these, the order in which I watched these. I watched this match last.
Okay.
And it was kind of cool to see, because in the other matches, Charlotte is really this like unstoppable goddess figure.
Right.
And it was actually really kind of cool to see the side of her that sells, and the side of her that seems like that seems vulnerable, and it's possible for her to experience pain. And she winds up winning this match in a way that I felt was not earned very well, like, because it was sort of like a, it starts off and it's somewhat equal, and then it's like beat down, beat down, beat down, beat down, beat down, beat down, beat down. And then when she comes back, to me, it felt like she came back too quickly.
She also wins with the figure eight after the whole story of the match being her leg getting destroyed.
Yeah.
And there's nothing really, they don't play with that very much. Whereas in the Asuka match, they do play more with her injury.
In regards to her like actually selling, it's worth pointing out she had not been on the main roster that long at this point, and at the time NXT was still like completely a developmental as opposed to its own brand like it's become. And Nikki had been this we can debate on whether she deserved it or not for hours. Nikki had been this unstoppable force in the women's division.
Yeah, we got to talk about that. So at this point, they're selling Nikki as the longest reigning Divas champion at 301 days. And they did this fucking infuriating thing for the fans because AJ Lee had been the longest running Divas champion. She had this year-long reign that culminated in that WrestleMania match where she beat the entire division, and then she lost it to Paige the next night. She had just left the company following CM Punk. And they knew that they could infuriate the fans by making Nikki Bella beat AJ's Divas title record. And they did it in such a way that was like even more taunting, where they had a match between Nikki and Charlotte on Raw, where if Charlotte had won the title, then Nikki would not have beaten AJ's streak. And they even did like a dusty finish where Charlotte seems to have won the title, but they had done the twin magic thing where Brie and Nikki had switched. So Charlotte had actually pinned Brie and not Nikki. So they reverse the decision and they don't restart the match, which would have been logical. They're just like, no, you won the match, but since you pinned the wrong person, you didn't win the title. And so Nikki became the longest reigning Divas champion.
Man, twin magic always worked in the early days, like when Nikki and Brie were kind of indistinguishable for each other. But after the boob job, man, I just never believed it.
Well,
Speaking of boob jobs,
yeah. Well,
Charlotte, each time if you watch them in progression, like Charlotte's boobs just get bigger and bigger.
I assumed that was a costume thing.
No. It's not really a secret. Like they've even poked fun on it on TV. She's had a lot of work done, and more power to her.
Well, if she's supposed to be more or less the same character that her father was, I think that if her father was like a woman today, he'd get a lot of plastic surgery too.
And I was really thinking about because I was thinking about this so her entrance is somewhat sexualized, I would say.
Yes.
And it is really interesting to think about how, before, for many, many years, women in wrestling were like, sort of pure sex objects, right? Like no agency or anything. And like now, so when I see a female wrestler now, sort of sexualized, like have a sexualized character or something, like there's part of me that thinks like, oh, is this like still in sort of the old-timey approach to it? But then there's part of me that's like, well, maybe now they're just as sexualized as the men.
Right.
Because for me, one of the things that my one of my major overarching theories for wrestling fandom is that whether you like it or not, whether you are a man who thinks you are entirely straight or not, the sexualization of the male wrestlers has always played a role in wrestling and has always played even an unconscious role for ostensibly heterosexual fans, because the dudes are, they're fucking beefcakes doing really physically impressive things and in very close, tight, intimate quarters. And so, yeah, I when I see female wrestlers, sexual, especially, Charlotte Flair is, she is sort of like a combination of Aphrodite and Athena, right? Like, she is this sort of like superhuman being that, of course you're kind of gonna, sexualize that to some degree.
And hey, before we move on, can we all just real quick pour one out for Charlotte's chin mole? R.I.P.
For what?
She had a mole on her chin that she also had removed at some point.
Yeah,
she's had a significant amount of
She has it in the first two matches, and then by the Asuka one, it's gone.
Oh, I didn't even notice.
One other thing I'd like to point out about her entrance, actually jumping to the WrestleMania 34 match. I'd like to go back to the Nikki Bella match a bit, but in that entrance, she comes out on a throne with like these like 3 Roman centurions or whatever, and that is interesting because 4 years earlier, also in New Orleans for WrestleMania 30, she was part of Triple H's entrance where he was on a throne surrounded by 3 women. Another one of which was Sasha Banks. So
wasn't Alexa Bliss the third one, I think?
Was Alexa
I
the third?
believe
Yeah.
so, yeah.
And so this was a kind of a cool callback to that. Now it's Charlotte on the throne,
yeah.
She's the
surrounded by a
queen.
bunch of dudes.
Well, it was kind of nice to see, like, in that entrance, it
Yeah.
was kind of, like, in its own way, it was sort of nice to see, like, oh, like, we've gone full circle, where, like, now she has this entrance where it's like, you know, she is this goddess with these, like, with these hot hunks who have no names or faces
No.
or personalities.
I loved
They're
it.
just there to be hunky. Yeah.
I love it. Charlotte and her man harem there is basically my life goal.
Yeah,
so.
100%.
so, yeah.
Oh no! I want one question about in the Bella Flair
Yeah,
match.
so this is, by the way, this match is from Night of Champions 2015. This
Okay.
is the rematch of Charlotte and Nikki Bella.
And fighting to the death over a belt that's shaped like a goddamn Bratz toy. Son of a bitch.
And I want to say one more thing about the build-up to the match. Charlotte is in Team PCB, very creatively named because it was Paige, Charlotte, and Becky. So
what does the PCB stand for?
Paige, Charlotte, Becky.
Oh, okay.
so
Penis, cock, ball sack.
Yes,
that would be
yes,
that
that
makes
makes
a lot
more
more
sense,
sense.
yeah.
Actually, I think,
That is an inaccurate description of the team, though, I think.
yeah.
Is
You
it?
know what?
Like-
I'm gonna bring that up. I'm gonna write them a letter and be like, guys.
So one night on Raw, Stephanie McMahon comes out and is like, "It's time for a women's revolution." And they bring out fucking Charlotte, Becky, and Sasha, along with all the other women that were already on the roster. Bayley stayed in NXT for a little while. And they
She was the champ at the time, yeah.
and they put Charlotte and Becky together with Paige. And they take Sasha and in Team PCB.
Right.
They take Sasha and they put her in Team Bad with 2 Ds with Naomi and Tamina.
Wait. So what does that stand for?
Bad.
This
It
is
stands
where
for-
the people of this is like the freaking
Poor Tamina. She
That's-
always tried.
Oy.
She never got
she doesn't have
really any good.
it was there was no reason for Sasha to be with those two other
Yeah.
than their skin tone
Ugh.
and yeah. And the only other so there's we see Alicia Fox come out with Team Bella, but she's just kind of their like third wheel cheerleader. The whole way that they did that was just so clunky. Like putting like Charlotte and Becky and Paige didn't belong together at all.
Yeah, no, it was definitely them just throwing everyone in there because what they wanted to do was basically restart the women's division with several of the new women that they've had in NXT. So they threw together a few teams to see what would happen, and the teams all dissolved pretty promptly, but it was a good enough launching point for all these women.
Yeah, worth noting is this match is for the Divas Championship, which a couple months later at WrestleMania got replaced with the Women's Championship. They ended up the Women's Championship they ended up making because the thing about the Divas Championship is it's literally the single most insulting thing they ever did to women's wrestling in the WWE. They introduced this belt that was literally a damn toy, and I still to this day wish they had retired it by pouring gasoline on it and burning it to pieces and melting it down into a metal dildo.
It seems like they had this period of time where they were like, oh, I guess like we should be less horribly overtly misogynistic, and then they went about trying to fix it in the dumbest possible way.
Yeah, that about sums it up. You know, and instead of being misogynistic and treating women like sex objects, they just kind of dismissed most of them as being like just lesser wrestlers.
Did you see the belt, Evan?
Oh yeah, it's I was
it's a Bratz
yeah,
style
it's
accessory.
really
Like,
dumb.
I'm sorry, this is my turn to go on a rant about
Please
how
do.
how insulted I was the entirety of that belt's existence. They retired the women's championship to merge it with that belt. And let's be honest, the women's championship at that point wasn't as respected as people like to remember it being. It had been pretty disrespected at that point as well. But this is literally just gaudy toy. They couldn't even make a belt that made the woman look serious at all. This is just garbage. If I had a chance, I would take a hammer to that thing.
When did they finally drop it?
Shortly after this match,
WrestleMania
yeah.
32.
Yeah, they basically they had once again Stephanie McMahon, Queen of Women's Wrestling, come out and say, "Hey, this match isn't going to be for the Divas Championship. Here's the new belt, an actual belt."
And you have earned the right to actually be called women.
Yeah, that's when
and
they
not
retired.
divas.
That's when they retired the name Divas, which is interesting because Total Divas still exists.
And look, I mean, Stephanie McMahon is a feminist icon, as we have stated before. As we have stated before on this podcast, she was the first woman to buy a private island where she hunts women for sports.
Future United States President Stephanie McMahon.
That's exactly the kind of feminist that Stephanie McMahon is. Oh my God!
Did you notice the ring announcer for this Night of Champions match?
Was it JoJo?
It was Eden Styles.
Oh, it was Eden
yeah,
Styles,
Eden
right?
Styles.
AKA Brand. Oh, go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, a.k.a. Brandy Rhodes, Cody Rhodes' wife, and a big part of the women's division on AEW,
I
for
got
better or
nothing.
worse.
I got nothing against Brandy.
I
People
like
are
Brandy.
too hard on Brandy.
Quick technical question. At one point, Nikki gets Charlotte in this weird kneeling on her head hold, where she's it's like she's working Charlotte's knee and is kneeling on her head at the same time.
It's like a kind of a half Boston crab, maybe, with her knee on
a
her
little
head.
bit,
Yeah.
yeah. I know it just looked fucking brutal.
Yeah,
That's
no, that's a good
That's
move.
my statement.
Charlotte's very flexible, and part of that is you're able to be put in holds like that.
Yeah.
Nikki's heel work is really great here. Charlotte's selling of her leg.
Oh, yeah.
I like how the event that initially injures Charlotte's leg is her just coming off the apron and landing badly, which is totally
all
a
it
thing
takes.
that can happen, right?
Oh yeah, totally realistic.
Seriously, the entire storyline of her getting her knee injured throughout this match looks so real right up until the very last move. Yeah. Right up until when she wins, and then suddenly her knee is better.
Nikki even does the shitty figure 4 around the ring post.
Hey, she did it though.
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah, she did fine. The Bellas get more shit than they deserve, especially at this point. They had been around for so many years already. They were the perfect act to end off the Divas division, because by now Nikki could hang. She didn't have the same style that they were trying to push in, and earlier in their career the Bellas were awful. But at this point, they were complete performers. They knew exactly where their mark was. They knew how to be the heels that they were trying to be, and they were. And when Charlotte finally wins, it was like a big momentous occasion. And the Bellas deserve what they finally get. They're going to the Hall of Fame this year. And some people have a problem with that, and I don't know why. I mean, I do know why, but it's like people who didn't evolve their opinions on them past, they were bad a decade ago. Yeah, well, they stuck with it and they got better.
Yeah, and especially Nikki.
Yeah.
I'm not shitting on Brie. She got good too, but really, it's especially Nikki.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there were some really cool little moments, Charlotte's getting a hope spot, and she's going for the backslide, and Nikki just kicks her leg out from the back.
Yeah.
Though I do think them inducting the Bellas this year is just timing wise, so they can do the Total Divas thing where they both come out for their induction all pregnant and shit, and it's adorable and inspiring, and it can be a big ol' moment on the TV show. Not saying they don't deserve it. I think that's the reason for the specific timing.
That is something crazy that just happened a month or two ago. The Bella twins announced that they are both pregnant
And do within weeks of each other.
Yeah, one of them is I'm pregnant. The other one's that's great. The next week, the other one's oh, me too.
And people are trying to be they clearly planned this, and it's no, they didn't.
They're human beings. Come
on.
on.
It's one of those cases
Vince
of
has
weird,
that much control.
Yeah, it's just one of those weird cases of stuff happening with twins has always happened historically that you can't really prove why it happens, but it does happen. One of them got pregnant on purpose and the other didn't.
They're also making a big deal that Mania is in Tampa this year, and so this is why they did the FCW documentary, because it's the return to Tampa of all these people who came up in FCW, which was located there.
Hopefully Mania's in Tampa this year.
And one thing I want to gripe about that FCW documentary, since we mentioned her, is them shitting on AJ Lee. They did not mention AJ Lee once in that entire documentary.
I think they showed one clip of her
They
the whole
showed
time.
two clips. They showed one clip of her taking a bump and one clip of her giving a promo, but with no audio.
They mentioned Sweet Poppy Sanchez, but they couldn't mention AJ Absolutely.
They even show like Dean Ambrose cutting a promo, who is actively wrestling for the competition. And I get it, they AJ maybe didn't leave on the best terms, but she kind of did. And CM Punk didn't leave on the best terms, but he is now working for them.
He's not working for them.
Well,
He's working
for
Fox.
But he's on one of their shows. I don't know. I thought that was a real snub. And
I liked seeing in the FCW documentary the Bella twins being interviewed together, because whenever you see them both being interviewed like as real people together, you can really see them being twins, because they finish each other's sentences. If any of them can't think of something, they will look at the other one, and the other one knows what they're thinking, and it's great.
Brie Bella bit Colt Cabana in a bar.
Right.
One more thing about the AJ snub. Yeah. Not only did they not mention her, but they made a big deal about how Natalya was the only woman on the FCW Divas roster who had any previous wrestling experience and knew how to wrestle.
Wrong.
Which is complete fucking bullshit. So, calling you out for that, WWE. Your fucking propaganda pieces are getting more and more spun as the years go on. That fucking I watched one episode of Ruthless Aggression, but man, is that a completely fabricated narrative.
What are you talking about? About how clearly WWF had to change to WWE because it was a revolution of new ideas and not because a bunch of pandas sued the crap out of them.
I'm enjoying the Ruthless Aggression series for what it is, and I know what it is. I was watching the show at the time. I don't think it's spun any more than they spun the Monday Night Wars series, which was spun a lot.
And to credit them, in that first, or in the Randy Orton episode, they do show Chris Benoit for a fraction of a second.
Right. They just show Randy Orton giving him the RKO, and like up until this point, they would mention like Randy Orton won the title at this event, and he was the youngest champion, and then they'd show him holding the belt, but they wouldn't show the match at all.
I'm guessing they're going to do an episode on Eddie Guerrero.
Oh, I hope so.
Like, they better fucking do an episode on Eddie Guerrero.
On just Eddie Guerrero.
Oh, just the tragedy of it all, man.
I mean,
maybe.
I
huge
think
part of Ruthless Aggression.
We'll see if Benoit shows up there at all.
Yeah, 'cause I don't necessarily think that's exactly the story they're telling.
I mean,
they're
part
doing
of the
episodes on like Cena and Orton and Lesnar and like Batista. Like that's.
I mean, that's an incredible. I mean, just leaving out Benoit is an enormous omission from that era. Yeah. Leaving out Eddie is.
Well, I don't think they're leaving out Eddie. I just don't think they're going to do a whole episode based just on Eddie.
I mean, yeah, that's
all right. Let's pause for a second.
I was feeling very alienated from that whole bit anyway.
That's why I kind of.
And we're back. Wait, hold on. I need to do some warm-ups. Brie Bella bit Colt Cabana in a bar. Brie Bella bit Colt Cabana in a bar.
I bought the bracelet.
Brie Bella brutally bit Colt Cabana in a bar.
Fantastic.
My last thought on the Flair Bella match is that when fucking Ric Flair comes up at the end, he looks so proud.
Oh yeah.
And so there was
that
zero,
emotion is fucking real.
Yeah,
there, man.
there's zero artifice there.
Like,
oh, it's so beautiful.
And I like Charlotte continues to sell her leg when she does the strut with Flair. Yeah. I thought that was a nice detail.
You gotta. Flair wouldn't want the kayfabe to break down.
Eventually they did a storyline where Charlotte rejected her dad, Rick, and was like, I don't need you anymore. I never needed you, kind of thing. And I thought it was cool that they did that too.
Is there enough of that storyline to fill an episode? Because we should
maybe when we do, because that was surrounding Becky Lynch, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe when we do a Becky Lynch episode, we'll talk about that. We'll watch the match, the SummerSlam match where Becky turns.
Yeah, right.
All right. So
now back to WrestleMania 34. Charlotte, who has been women's champion on and off for about a couple of years at that point.
Yeah, they've been having her win the title and lose it back and forth to this day, kind of frequently.
Mostly to Sasha Banks.
Yeah, one of Ric Flair's big calling cards now is that, like, for what it's worth, officially speaking, he's won some variation of the world title more often than anyone else. The official number is 16 times. If you really want to get into it, he probably won the title 4 or 5 more times, which is a whole other story that we could talk about. And so they've been running the numbers up on Charlotte. She's up to 10 now.
In 5 years.
Right.
As opposed to, Flair's 16 over like 30 years.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
She has an incredible entrance. There's two. This is back-to-back fucking unbelievable entrances.
Yeah.
Oh,
this entrance
So
is fantastic.
Asuka is undefeated at this point.
Yeah.
Completely.
She won the Royal Rumble. She just has plowed through everybody.
She was undefeated in NXT. She won the women's title in NXT. She beat all comers. She never lost the title to anybody. She got injured, so they stripped her of the title and brought her up to the main roster, and then somebody else won the title, but nobody beat Asuka. Yeah.
Nobody had been ready for Asuka,
This
as
is-
she would put
This
it.
entire WrestleMania just pissed me off.
So, yeah, Asuka and Nakamura had won their respective Royal Rumbles. Both went to the WrestleMania title matches, and both lost.
Ugh.
Right, they could have ushered in this like era of like Japanese pride, and instead Vince does what he always does with Japanese wrestlers and fucked it up because he doesn't get it.
If they wanted to sign Okada, maybe they should have shown him that, like, they're willing to go with a Japanese person, but they're not.
I was Asuka's the most visually interesting character. Just like, I don't know, like her
she's
whole
fantastic.
deal. Is she canonically like from the future? Because you do sort of get that
She
vibe.
calls herself the Empress of Tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean that's fucking awesome. Because if that means something, it's amazing, and if it doesn't mean anything, it's also amazing.
It's also amazing.
You got the King Crimson-y
Oh, yeah.
of her theme
yeah.
music
Yes,
this
her
time,
theme
right?
music bears a strong resemblance to probably the most popular song by the band. That's pretty much my favorite band. So I'm all in for Asuka.
Go listen to 21st Century Schizoid Man. I think it was sampled in some recent hip hop song.
It was
It was sampled by Kanye
yeah.
West a
By-
decade ago.
Oh.
now.
more than
whatever.
a decade actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
That's
listen to Kanye West.
I like that album, though. It's very good.
I mean,
His first
I'll
couple
check
albums are
it
great.
out. I'll
Yeah.
check it
I mean, the point is, Asuka as a character is so badass. I truly believe that she's the one that could conquer the ocean.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. She
Completely.
could fight anything. Anything from the depths.
I saw her eat some fried octopus tentacle like balls on her YouTube channel. So that's
Which-
conquering
Her
the ocean
YouTube
right
channel
there.
is great.
Her YouTube
Absolutely
channel is
incredible.
fantastic. Her and-
Takoyaki is what that's called.
takoyaki. Her and Kikutaro sat around her backyard and made it, and like the thing you use to make it, and like he's making it, and she's just sitting there like, I'm hungry, and then they eat it.
It's fucking delicious. I had it on the street in Kyoto when I was there.
Yeah, sounds great.
I try not to eat things that are smarter than humans. The only reason it's because octopi have a short lifespan.
Yeah.
Right? If octopi like lived 30, 40 years, they would have a civilization down there.
Yeah, stay out of the ocean.
But so this match between Charlotte and Asuka is way better than the Nakamura Styles match
So
that we
much better.
covered.
Yeah.
Just the intensity right from the beginning, the lightning fast chain wrestling and off the ropes reversals and stuff like that is breathtaking.
There's this weird spin sit Charlotte does at the beginning that's just ridiculously athletic. Do you know which one I mean, Ben?
Yeah. She's coming off the ropes and she like spins into some sort of leg lock.
Yeah,
Is that what you're
Yeah,
talking about?
yeah. She like
Yeah.
spins and sits down and gets Asuka in a leg lock.
There were a few spots that I really liked. One was there's a point where like Asuka's lying there like seemingly dead, and Charlotte does a moonsault onto her, and then Asuka at the last second like kicks into life and wraps her legs around Charlotte
In
and
a
gets her-
triangle choke.
Yeah.
Yeah, captures her in midair there. Spectacular.
Well, the match is incredible. I just disagree with the outcome. But go on.
Yeah.
And then after the triangle choke, Charlotte reverses that into a Boston Crab,
Yeah.
which then Asuka reverses into a pin, which Charlotte reverses into a pin attempt. There are so many sequences of like chains of 5 or 6 moves together in this match that are really awesome.
Whereas a lot of the times the top men stars in the WWE will wrestle like they're trying not to piss off Vince McMahon, the women still wrestle like they have something to prove, and you can tell. And so this is the third Charlotte match chronologically we're watching, and just her progress over the 5 years. Like she didn't carry herself in NXT like she was truly the best. Here, she carries herself like what she says she is, the queen. She comes out and like you'd be surprised if she loses to anybody.
and like I said, the the announcers in the early matches, the announcers keep talking about how she's
Yeah.
Ric Flair's daughter. In this, it comes up like once.
Right. It's not
That's it.
irrelevant, but by now it's not the focal point.
And I would also say one of the things that she has progressed on the most, I was talking about her selling and her facial expressions. I think that one of the most important skills for any wrestler is to be able to express the specific kind of frustration that comes from your opponent constantly kicking out and you doing a series of complex, awesome moves, and your opponent still kicks out, and just that, like I'm on record as saying, like, feel like Christopher Daniels has done that better than anybody, like, where, just that like, how do I do this? What am I supposed to do? How much more can I do? And in this moment, there's a point where Asuka kicks out, and Charlotte Flair is like, she's like angry crying, just like, so like, oh, how am I supposed to defeat you?
Yeah, that's when
Asuka,
Asuka Asuka kicks out of the spear,
Yeah.
like right before the finish.
Good-looking
And
spear.
yeah, like Charlotte is so like bratty and entitled in her frustration.
As Asuka like taunts you with every movement she makes. She wants you to know that she thinks it's funny that you can't beat her. And she'd been doing that act for a long time at that point, and it worked so well. Right, but Charlotte beat her. Charlotte, as Asuka said, was ready for Asuka. She was the first one who was ready for Asuka. Charlotte bridges up into the figure 8 from the figure 4, and like Asuka had worked on her arm the whole time, and Charlotte remembered it and only bridged with the one arm. Like, as I think Corey Graves put it, she made a tripod of herself. And that was incredible to
She
me.
uses the bad arm to support the
Yeah.
good arm a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's all with the good arm.
I just disagree with most of the finish here, honestly. I don't think Asuka should have tapped if they were going to have her lose. I think she should have gotten, like, knocked the fuck out in order to lose, And I don't think Asuka and Charlotte should have hugged. Why are you hugging the woman that just beat you?
They
and
should
beat your
never
streak?
hug. This
There
is a
are
point.
certain scenarios where hugging is okay. This was not one of them.
But this is a point that you've made before, Doc, that I think Quackenbush would talk
made.
about.
Yeah, it's something you learn if you go through the Chikara school and you don't know this. You haven't been paying attention.
Like, you shake hands
Yeah,
to
there's
show
like a
respect.
respect.
yeah,
thing
it
if you
was
have
okay.
to.
It was okay that she shook hands. It was okay that she said Charlotte was ready for Asuka. It was okay she raised Charlotte's hand. There was no reason a hug was needed here.
Yeah. they're-
Like,
they're
Asuka
not
should have been
buddies.
more mad, and she honestly, I don't think she should have tapped. They should have had her lose another way. I don't think she should have lost at all, but I could go on for hours.
This is the rare match where I'd say I could have used an additional 3 to 5 minutes in this match.
Probably.
And especially because I felt like, because it was such like a clash of the Queen versus the Empress.
Yeah.
Like such a clash of personalities that I wanted them to end this match spent. And it did not feel like they were.
The finish felt kind of weird, too, because the moment that you already talked about with Charlotte's frustration. So Asuka kicks out of the spear. Charlotte is super frustrated. She grabs Asuka's leg. Asuka kind of kicks at her. And then she just puts on the figure 8.
Yeah.
Like, there was really no drama behind the finish at all.
They had to just go home.
I mean, yeah, maybe they ran out of time.
Yep.
It is WrestleMania.
I got that would make sense because that actually would track with sort of how it felt, where it felt like there was this great, this sort of great arc to the match, and then they got to a point where they're just like, oh shit, we got to wrap this up.
Well, part of being a professional and a professional wrestler is that if you get word that it's time to go home, you go home.
Yeah.
You finish the match, because if the signal then is everything else that has to happen on the show has to start happening, and if you say, oh no, well, I'm just going to take another 10 minutes, well, you're taking it from somebody. And if you're good, you don't have to have it be so abrupt. And I mean, these two are very good. It wasn't that abrupt. But yeah, if they had another couple of minutes in there, or if they had figured out how to tell the story a little shorter, it would have been a better match than it already was. And it was a very good match.
Oh yeah, excellent match.
Some other really great spots in the match, though kind of dangerous. Charlotte does the Spanish fly off the top rope, but Asuka is standing on the second rope, not on the top, so she falls a lot lower than Charlotte, and it's really fucking dangerous. It looked like she almost totally landed right on her head and would have broken her neck, but it was spectacular. And then Asuka reverses the natural selection into a really cool like arm and neck
Yeah.
lock. I'm not sure exactly what you call that.
Oh, on a technical level, this match was incredible.
Asuka's rope thing accessory that hangs off of her tights. She's got like a rope thing. Like,
Oh, you mean the spines of her fallen enemies?
And then, well, that would be awesome if that's what it
She's
is.
got a bunch of tassels and stuff. I'm not sure specifically.
It definitely looks. It definitely looks like it's.
Okay, like a sash that has a long
Oh, yeah,
kind
I
of
think I know
tail.
what
to
you're
kind
it.
of, but yeah, but it's an action. I mean, she wrestles it like once she takes off, like her cloak and mask and everything, she still has this like rope thing hanging.
Okay.
Yeah,
and it looks really cool. It seems like it would be a liability.
Right, the
It's like-
tassels are the spines of the enemies.
yes, yeah, that would be.
Jeff Hardy used to wrestle for a while with like his towel hanging out of his back pocket, and it was cool because he'd do all these flipping moves, and it would act as like a trail. Something like that is similar, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. One other thing about the finish, they hug. In contrast to Shinsuke Nakamura and AJ Styles, where he, gave him the nut shot at the end and turned heel. I think that would have been more appropriate here.
Oh yeah,
Asuka
kicked
turning
Charlotte in
heel.
the head or something.
No, I
Yeah.
was mad that Asuka lost for one, and I was mad that Asuka wasn't more mad.
Yeah.
It would have fit her character more to be like really upset about it, I think.
Well, yeah, especially like once again, there's so much build up. And there's, it's really presented as like these two forces of nature coming together that at the end to just be like, no, okay, whatever.
It took them another year and a half to turn Asuka heel, and it's been really effective since
yeah.
they've done it.
Oh, now
she's great.
she's finally doing great now, but like not only like did I not think she should lose here, this really like started a trend of just they for a year or so there they made her look like stupid as fuck, which was upsetting.
But the great thing about Asuka is no matter what they've done with her, no matter how they've demoted her down the card or done stupid shit with her, she has stayed over.
Oh yeah,
Because the
because she's
people who-
incredible.
Yeah, she's incredible. The people who love her will continue to love her. And that means a lot to the WWE. You'll see them do this a lot. They'll de-push people and see if they still stay over.
Right.
They did it with Daniel Bryan. I can't think of another example
Well,
off the
if
top
you,
of my
if you
head.
do stay over and weather the storm and don't like throw a hissy fit and quit or become unprofessional, then you're pretty much gold for the rest of your life if you stick around and they decide to start pushing you again. Like Daniel Bryan now is made. Like, remember when it was like, oh, they're not going to use him, and then they start using him on top, and it's like, they're not really using him on top. Now Daniel Bryan is in a spot where they can put him anywhere on the card, and he is a dangerous veteran who could be the champion tomorrow at any point. And like, if Asuka sticks around, they're going to treat her like that forever.
Like, I mean, dude, Daniel Bryan was gone for 4 years, finally got to come back, and everyone's like, oh, is it going to be the same? And he was just immediately the champ again.
yeah.
And with Asuka, in the build-up to WrestleMania 35, they needed to put the SmackDown Women's title on someone for a little while.
Yep.
And so they had Asuka beat Becky Lynch, which everyone accepted.
Yeah.
And Asuka was on top all of a sudden again.
It fed into the story of the match she had again with Becky just like a couple of months ago, where Becky had been champion all this time, and it was like, well, you've beaten everybody, but Asuka beat you. The last person who beat you was Asuka, and you haven't beaten her since then. And then finally she beat Asuka in a fantastic match.
And now Asuka is women's tag team champions with Kairi Sane. They are the Kabuki Warriors, which, I mean, again, they had to fucking put the Japanese women together for some reason.
So
But they're awesome. They're both heels, and they're great.
Vince is just so casually racist against Japanese people.
Well, I think I don't know. I mean, probably. I think he also assumes the audience is kind of racist. And I think the reason for putting them together is like, oh, if we have two Japanese women on the roster, the audience isn't going to be able to tell them apart. I'm
Which
pretty
is-
sure that's what his thing is. So we have to make them a tag team so that the people know that there are two of them.
Which is silly because all of the women Japanese wrestlers that are on main shows right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's 3 of them. There is Kairi, there's Asuka, and there's Io.
Io on NXT.
Io Shirai are all vastly different from one another.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say if the wrestling, if the WWE fandom consisted entirely of people as racist as Vince, that would probably be accurate.
Yeah.
And so I can absolutely see Vince thinking that.
A little aside here. Did you notice Cena in the crowd? For
I
his
did.
match?
John Cena, man, I want to watch one of like John Cena's like comedic films that he's made because
Yeah.
there is something inherently funny about John Cena.
Just sitting in the audience.
Yeah, and like and he's like he's kind of making a face,
Yeah.
but it's also kind of a face that you could believe that that's just what he looks like all the time, and there's just something that's funny about
He
it.
was sitting there all WrestleMania in case The Undertaker shows up. He had been challenging him for weeks with no response.
Yeah, and like he had lost his chances to get like title matches at WrestleMania. Everything. The story was like, I guess I just don't have a match at WrestleMania, but I'm still gonna be there. I can't miss it. I'll buy a ticket. And then they keep showing him, no, he's really just sitting there watching WrestleMania.
I love
And
the
then
look
right
on
at the end,
Asuka's
you know,
face. Yeah.
Yeah.
They come up to him like, oh, The Undertaker's here. So he runs to the back, and Asuka's like, oh, cool.
He
Like,
just sprints
what's Cena
past the
doing?
women. Yeah, I think that they gave enough of a post match to Charlotte and Asuka that it wasn't Cena like stepping on them too hard.
Right.
Um,
They didn't just
yeah.
disappear.
No,
You
no.
know, they were.
Cena ran by them, and they were both like, well, I guess John Cena, you know?
And I do like things on wrestling shows like that where it all feels like one kind of ecosystem where they're interacting rather than the segments being really separate.
Agreed. I like it when it's like they all know each other. The match with The Undertaker, by the way, lasted about 3 minutes. Undertaker dumped Cena on his head and pinned him. It was fantastic.
Another great squash.
Another
Yeah,
great
that's-
squash
yeah.
match, right? That we could have subbed in, but we watched so many squash matches.
So, Charlotte she won the Royal Rumble again this year. I guess by the time this airs, we will be past WrestleMania.
If they don't cancel it due to coronavirus.
Right.
Which might actually happen.
We are recording this on it's March 11th today.
Yes.
Yes.
I think so. By the time this airs, which will be I think in the first week in April,
We might all be dead.
Yeah, we may well be in the stand situation.
If you would like to help us buy canned food and canned air, we will invite you to join our Patreon for $5 a month. We record a whole other episode every week, and you can have access to that, access to the whole archive of premium episodes, which is growing quite nicely now. There's over 20 of them now.
Yeah, we've got
Growing like the coronavirus.
We've got I think there's 25 we've got 25 episodes. I think there's like 22 or 23 on the Patreon and then a few
Yeah.
more scheduled to come out. We
Yeah.
also if you sorry.
I was going to say you get early access to our episodes basically when we're done. Whenever he has time, Evan edits our episodes himself. And pretty much as soon as they're edited and ready, they're loaded up onto the Patreon and you can listen to them.
If you want to support us but you don't have the $5 extra because you've got 40 other Patreons that you're supporting, which hey,
Which
a
is
lot
great.
of us are in that position.
I'd rather you do that than be giving all of your money to, a giant corporation.
Yeah, you can give us $1 a month, and you don't get access to the premium episodes, but you do get access to the advanced main feed episodes.
We are also working on accepting Dogecoin.
And we're Dogecoin, Bitcoins,
Buttcoin.
all the other made up fucking coins. I mean,
Pretty
money.
sure all that shit is like crashed really hard in the last couple of weeks.
I mean, look,
Guess a good time
money
to buy.
money is
I guess
also
so.
fictitious. So why not have double
Time is fictitious.
Yeah, why not have double made up money?
Why do we do anything, man?
Yeah. Time. We don't recognize time or the existence of time. Time is a social construct.
There are only two truths in life. One, taxes, and two, the Paw Patrol is completely evil.
Yes. Yeah.
But what about our truth?
Oh, our truth is my greatest joy in
Yeah,
life.
we are going to do an R-Truth episode.
Oh, we
sometime.
have
Truth
to.
is
Yeah,
great.
yeah, he
I-
seems amazing.
I only watched a little bit of Elimination Chamber, but in the pre-show, R-Truth came up to the panel and talked about how excited he was to be at WrestleMania, and they were like, "Truth, it isn't WrestleMania." His timing is just perfect.
Follow us on Twitter at ContestingW.
Yeah.
Tweet at us. Let us know if there's anything you would like to hear us cover. If there's anything you think I should know about wrestling that may increase my enjoyment of the genre. And, we love you guys.